Ever have a boss assign a special difficult task but won't pay for the resources to do it? Mine was the historic visit of Pope John Paul II to South Carolina on September 11th, 1987. This adventure began when the Bishop of Charleston, South Carolina, visited Rome in 1984 and was asked a curious question by the Pope. How is it to live with 98% non-Catholic people? It's a great challenge, the bishop said. This resulted in a South Carolina stop added to the Pope's trip to the South, which included Miami and New Orleans, all on the same day. At the time, I was chief photographer for the Greenville News-Piedmont, one of the 3 largest newspapers in the state. The Columbian newspapers were significant competitors, and it was on their turf. The event was to begin with a 5 p.m. church service, followed by a meeting with ecumenical leaders, Reed Baptist, on the University of South Carolina campus at 6:30, and finally by an 8:05 mass at the football stadium, with John Paul leaving for New Orleans at 9. My executive editor, who regularly caused me to grind my teeth in my sleep, you can ask my wife, decreed we would do an on-deadline 12-page special section consisting mostly of photos. Our usual deadline for photos was 10:30 p.m., which made the copy desk crazy. We'd stretch to 11:30 for really special events. And if the press didn't start on time, papers would not get to distributors downstate. Columbia is about 103 miles from Greenville, about an hour-and-a-half drive time. Do you start to see the challenge? Remember, this was the days of film. We had processed 10 rolls at a time, taking about 20 minutes for a batch, then 5 minutes to dry, and 10 to 12 minutes to make a print and write a caption. So I did my homework, and in the spring of 1987, when attending a meeting for the media covering the papal visit, I found a commercial custom photo lab about a 5-minute drive from both the stadium and the university. Fully equipped for everything, we'd use an AP laser photo machine and process, print, and transmit the photos throughout the visit. A note, to send a color image in those days, you made a color print with registration marks, put it on the drum of the transmitter, and then lifted a tab that changed a filter after every 7-minute pass, sending separate cyan, magenta, yellow, and black prints. The press combined these for the color image you saw at home. Each color photo took 28 minutes to transmit. We're talking analog, right? Since the lab was in a part of town that was going to have streets closed when the Pope arrived, they were happy to rent their facility to us. Price, $1,200 with staff. Really reasonable was my reaction. By the way, my Columbia competition had their office next door to the football stadium. I had worked there and knew it took but a few steps to get film back to their lab. But my executive editor, killed the deal. Too expensive. This was after previous instructions, Darrell, spare no expense. So here's what I did. 6-person crew of photographers, leaving 3 back in Greenville for other coverage. We arrived in Columbia by 8 a.m. that day. This was our pregame meeting at a gas station in Irmo, just outside of town. The tight security meant we needed to be in place early, really early. Fred and Frank went to the church. Fred was positioned inside, and Frank was on a truck in front of the Pope mobile as it went from church to university. Because traffic had been stopped anywhere near the Pope, when the service was over, Fred walked outside, put his film along with caption information in a bright green envelope, looked for a bicycle rider wearing a bright green t-shirt, and threw it to him. The rider hustled to the nearest interstate exit where a reporter was waiting in a car and drove it to Greenville. At that time, I was an avid cyclist and asked the local club if they would help us with coverage. I couldn't pay anything, but the writers were intrigued by being part of the whole wild scheme that we got all the help we needed. This photographer bike car relay continued along the parade route. And until it reached my lab tech, Jennifer Byes, in Greenville. I was monitoring progress from the paper's State Capitol Bureau and communicating with photographers by cell phone. Yes, we had cell phones at 87. I had borrowed several of the new brick phones from Southwestern Bell, who didn't charge me, just asked that we take photos of us using them in obvious papal venues. Early product placement. After the event in the University Quad, the Pope took a short break. We didn't. Myself and the others got to the stadium early because these would be the money shots. I was riding with Fred because my bicycle was in the hatch of his car. We deployed ourselves where we could with one photographer allowed down the field. The rest of us roamed the crowd. I'd also rented a wide-lux camera. The lens in this camera rotated 150 degrees, which gave us our center spread. The Pope arrived at the stadium. We shot furiously. At about 8:50, I gathered film from all the staffers, hustled to the parking lot, got my bicycle, and rode past the other photographers who thought stopping all traffic didn't mean them. Wrong, but it didn't include a cyclist as I pedaled past them to a small downtown airport about 2 miles away. Waiting there was my favorite helicopter pilot, Jerry Green, in his Jet Ranger. Jerry was famous for being the hijack pilot in a prison escape a few years earlier that resulted in a made-for-TV movie none of you ever saw. Putting the bicycle in the rear of the chopper, we waited. When the airspace cleared for the Pope, we took off, and we were airborne. Heading northwest, we were making good time until we had an unexpected thunderstorm ahead of us. Helicopter, nighttime, and lightning, not a good mix. So after a weather advisory, we diverted south instead of following the interstate as planned. In those pre-GPS days, the very calm Jerry mentioned after a while he wasn't really sure where we were. I saw some lights ahead, and we could see it was a high school football game. This is a Friday night. As we came down lower, we could read Greenwood in the end zones, and I knew we were about 35 miles southeast of Greenville. We were only running a few minutes off schedule. Soon we headed northwest and saw the city lights. We were able to set down on top of the Hyatt Hotel parking garage, about 4 blocks from the newspaper office. I got my bike out, thanked Jerry, headed down the ramps. When I got to the gate, the guard wanted me to pay for parking the bike. I just got off the helicopter, I said. What helicopter, he says, that lifted off behind his head. Went down the street, came to the newspaper's front door, handed the film off to Jennifer. We were pretty proud of the result. Finally, remember that the $1,200 that was too expensive? Helicopter charter $750, special t-shirts for bike messengers and envelopes, $125, wide Lux rental, $125, mileage and wages for reporter acting as film couriers, $175. Total, $1,175. So we saved $25. Thank you.